Hi friends, it's Miss Christina with some mad science. Today we're going to do an experiment called sink or float. What do you think makes items sink or float? Is it their size? How much they weigh? Why does a rubber ducky float but a marble sinks? The rubber ducky is bigger than the marble and they weigh about the same, but the rubber ducky floats and the marble goes right to the bottom. Let's find out. We're going to test a bunch of different items and place them into two piles. One pile of things that sink and one pile of things that float. We're going to try to figure out what's the difference. Why does one act one way and the other a different way? Before we start, make sure you have permission from your grown-up and that they know what items you're putting into the water. So this is an experiment you can watch me do just like here in the video, or something you can do at home in your bathtub. But water can be dangerous and it can ruin certain objects. Things like paper especially can get ruined in the water. So make sure you check with them first before doing it yourself. You don't have to use the same objects that I'm using, but the ones I'm using, are all things that I know are okay for me to put in the water. So for each item, I'm going to hold it up and you're going to tell me if you think it'll sink or float, and then we'll throw it in the water and find out. Ready? Okay, so I have to move my camera a little bit so you can see my big bucket of water here. So here we go. Hopefully you can see in there. And like I said, this is something that would work really well in a bathtub because it's much easier to drain the water that way than having to pick up a big heavy container, but I'll figure it out. So our first item is something we already mentioned. We have a rubber duck. Do you think this will float or sink? Let's see. Well, he flopped over, but he's floating. Okay, so our rubber duck goes in one pile, and I will show you all of them at the end. So now we have our other example, a marble. Do you think this will sink or float? And there it went, all the way down to the bottom. So now I'm gonna get all wet and stick my hand in there, but our marble is going to go into our sink pile. How about this really cool looking shell? Not too big, not too heavy. Do you think this will sink or float? And that one sank all the way down to the bottom. So this is going to go with our marble. Now we have this big mega block. Do you think this will sink or float? Let's see. It floats. Okay, so our mega block is going to go over by our rubber duck. How about this nifty little hole puncher? So this one is made out of metal. It's got some rubber on it here. Do you think this will sink or float? She sank. All right. Make sure you use water that's not too hot or cold if you're going to be sticking your hand in there like me. Okay. How about an eraser? Sink or float? Sink. Are you noticing a pattern with these items? Can you make a guess now why you think some of them are sinking and some are floating? Let's try a cork. This is about the same size as the shell that we put in there. Let's see if this will sink or float. float. So add that to our float pile. How about a battery? This is about the same size too. Sink or float? Sink. Okay, let's try this little teeny dinosaur. This one is made out of plastic. Do you think this will sink or float? And bonus points, do you know what kind of dinosaur this is? Okay, it's going in. That one sank. That little dinosaur sank all the way to the bottom. Did that surprise you? That surprised me. I thought maybe that one would float. Well, I'm going to leave it in there because I'm going to put his friend in there too. A much bigger dinosaur, if it'll fit. Do you think this big dinosaur is going to sink or float? Let's see. Take a little bath. Ah, interesting. Let's try maybe a different position. If it goes head first, does that change it? No. Our big dinosaur floats. But our little teeny tiny dinosaur sank. That's really interesting. I wonder why that is. Let's try two more things. I have a rock that has a cute little smiley face on it. Do you think this will sink or float? I think you might have an idea already. Oh, that one sank. And our last object is a clothespin. What do you think, sink or float? Let's see. And that one floats. So, very interesting. I'm going to fish these out and put them into our piles and then show you what we came up with. All right. Let me move my bucket of water and show you our piles here. So, trying to get a good eye on it. So this is our sink pile. We have our little tiny dinosaur, an eraser, a hole puncher, battery, a rock, a marble, and a shell. Over here is our float pile. We have a big dinosaur, a mega block, a cork, a rubber duck, and a clothespin. What is interesting about these two piles? I think it's very interesting that most of the items that floated are bigger than the items that sank. See that big dinosaur compared to that little tiny marble? So why do you think that is? Well, we're going to talk about it a little bit. So the answer is density. Density is a measure of how solid something is. So basically, everything is made up of little tiny particles called molecules. If the molecules in the object are closer together, the item is more solid or more dense. There are more molecules and they're all tightly packed together. But if the molecules are farther away from each other, the object is less solid or less dense. For example, a penny is more dense than a cork, which you saw is something that floated. So the objects that sank in the water had more density than the objects that floated. So it's not even about the size or the weight necessarily, it's about how close together all of these molecules are. So there's our really easy experiment for today. I hope you get a chance to try it out at home and let me know how it works out. I'll see you next time. Bye.